Some of Jose Baez's closing argument in this case. And David, you were talking about this clip just a little while ago. Your thoughts upon hearing it for the second or the third or the fourth time?
Well, it's classic, Baez. It's classic, punch holes wherever you can. Every moment of the testimony, you're going to separate what he's calling truth from fiction. His big moment, I think, in that clip is when he took out the photograph that Aaron Hernandez took with a fan in the back room of the nightclub that night. He's trying to paint the picture and lay out the scenario. Here's Aaron Hernandez having a drink. He's very calm. He's having a good time. He allowed a fan to take a picture with him. He walks out on camera very calmly. He separates that from the testimony of Bradley, where Bradley said he had to drag him out of there because he was about to get into a fight. So Baez is very effective there, in my opinion, showing the video footage of Hernandez leaving the club in a very, calm, mannerly fashion, and didn't look too upset at that point.
Marie, your thoughts?
My favorite part was the truth is not the truth. It reminded me of Trump's alternative facts. I think it was a very effective way getting across to the jury that what they're hearing is just not truthful. And that's all he really has to do is poke holes in the prosecution's case. And he's good at it.
Yeah, I thought that the visuals were helpful. The videos that we saw played in the defense closing were interesting and helpful because they point out some of the things that I wish we had the time to edit together here. Discrepancies all over the place between the various witnesses, even within the witnesses. Things that the witnesses could, interestingly enough, not remember. I started working through a lengthy list of all of the things that Hernandez's fiance couldn't remember. She was called as a prosecution witness, but she couldn't remember things that would seem that the average person would remember. I mean, for instance, if a car went missing from my garage, I'm sure that my wife, or when she was my fiance, would have said, "Hey, what happened to that car?" Right. She can't remember asking about it, having a conversation about it, anything. So how do these people wind up on the stand?
If I'm a juror in this case, and I'm going back to deliberate, the only thing I care about, and I said this when I was here before, I believe the only factor that's going to determine the verdict in this case is if you buy Bradley's story, full out, hands down, no questions asked. Now, can you do that? Can somebody take a convicted felon under the circumstances that night with all the surrounding circumstances, with a lack of physical evidence, and convict just on his testimony alone? All these minor discrepancies and inconsistencies, it's window dressing for the rest of the case. Baez is very good at that. He's just painting the windows, and he's getting ready just to land the punch. You and I talked about the fight last time, the prize fight, the heavyweight battle, and he went toe-to-toe with Bradley, and I think Baez won. And I think at the end of the day, he's going to win. And all of this is, as I said, the undercard.
But I think memory is a funny thing. Even if everyone was truthful, there would be a lot of lacks of memory because memories work different for different people, and you'd be surprised if you ask the three of us of what went on today, the different stories that would come out. So I don't think that the lack of memories is the biggest thing, it's the credibility of the witness.
And I think Baez made that point somewhere in his closing that the prosecution's witnesses were all lining up with the same story exactly, and to Marie's point, no one ever has the exact same memory of the events. And in law school, they would teach us if there was an accident, if there was an incident, and you had three witnesses, you had three different accounts of the same incident.
Now, how does the jury deal with that, though? Does the jury just sit there and say, well, we believe this to be the way that it went down, and they try to stitch it together in a way that it most closely resembles rather a finished garment, or do they just say nobody agrees it didn't happen?
No, I think that's how your mind normally works. You have pieces of a puzzle and you put it together the best you can and the best it fits, and then that's your story. But again, here I think the biggest problem, the biggest hurdle for the prosecution is the credibility of their star witness.
So if the jury's trying to piece together pieces of a puzzle, and they say, well, I don't have some of the pieces here, is that reasonable doubt?
The question is, how many pieces are missing? If there are a couple of pieces missing, no. If half the puzzle is missing, yes. They'll fill in the small pieces,
Yeah, well,
What was also discussed by Baez toward the end of his closing is the prerequisite before you get to beyond a reasonable doubt is to basically have the need for a strong possibility of guilt. And he's arguing that they don't come close to that strong possibility of guilt before you even get to beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's where he's leading this jury. That's where he wants this jury to go. The state has the burden to prove it. It's high burden. In his closing also, I don't think we saw that. He had an exhibit, almost looked like a thermostat, and the very, very top of it, he had that beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden there is in American jurisprudence. Those were his words.
I'm curious to know if the jury has any idea of the other murder that he's serving time for, or are these people completely, innocent on that issue, or was it in the newspapers, or is this not really a completely fair trial? Because that would influence my decision, knowing that he had killed someone a year later, 2 years later.
I mean, we hope that the voir dire process wiped that off the map, but did it really wipe it off the map? We don't know.
We've spoke earlier during this trial also about jurors coming in with their biases and prejudices, and you hope that they're all objective.